The opioid crisis, arguably the most devastating man-made public health disaster in modern American history, was not born from ignorance or accident. It was the product of a deliberate and deeply cynical campaign by pharmaceutical companies, most notoriously Purdue Pharma, to mislead doctors, regulators, and the public about the safety of their drugs. The central lie was simple: that OxyContin, a powerful extended-release formulation of oxycodone, was minimally addictive. This claim, repeated endlessly in marketing materials and by sales representatives, ignited a national epidemic of opioid addiction, overdose deaths, and societal breakdown, all while generating billions in profits. When OxyContin was launched in 1996, Purdue Pharma positioned it as a breakthrough in pain management. The company claimed that its extended-release mechanism made it safer and less likely to be abused than traditional opioids. Sales reps were trained to emphasize this supposed safety profile, citing pseudoscientific claims and a widely misused letter to the editor in the New England Journal of Medicine from 1980 that stated addiction was rare in hospital patients, a completely unrelated context that was intentionally distorted. Doctors, encouraged by these assurances and a cultural shift toward aggressive treatment of chronic pain, began prescribing OxyContin in record numbers. What Purdue didn't tell them, or deliberately obscured, was that the drug could be crushed, snorted, or injected to bypass its time-release coating and deliver an intense, immediate high. Nor did they emphasize the high risk of dependency that comes with any long-term opioid use, especially when prescribed for routine chronic pain rather than acute or terminal conditions. Instead, they rolled out one of the most aggressive marketing campaigns in pharmaceutical history: lavish speaking fees to doctors, targeted promotional materials, and direct outreach to general practitioners who often lacked specialized training in pain management or addiction. The result was catastrophic. Prescription rates skyrocketed, as did addiction rates. Communities across America, especially in rural, working-class areas, were flooded with opioids. When prescriptions ran out or became harder to obtain, many turned to heroin or, later, fentanyl, intensifying the crisis. Families were shattered, overdose deaths soared into the hundreds of thousands, and the societal cost, measured in healthcare, law enforcement, lost productivity, and human suffering, ran into the trillions. Purdue Pharma, meanwhile, made more than $35 billion from OxyContin before declaring bankruptcy in 2019 under a mountain of lawsuits. But Purdue was not alone. Other companies, such as Johnson & Johnson, which supplied the raw materials, McKesson, AmerisourceBergen, and Cardinal Health, which distributed the drugs, all played roles in the supply chain, profiting from the relentless push of opioids into communities. The entire ecosystem, from manufacturers to marketers to regulators, was complicit, either through active participation or silent negligence. Even as the crisis worsened, industry actors fought back against regulation and accountability. Purdue continued to push higher-dose pills, promoted off-label use, and attempted to influence medical guidelines. In 2007, the company paid a $600 million fine and had 3 executives plead guilty to misbranding, but it did not change its core business practices. Instead, the company expanded internationally and sought to maintain its dominance, even as death tolls rose. Only after years of investigative journalism, academic research, and legal action did the full scale of the deception become public. In 2019, Purdue declared bankruptcy to shield itself from liability, and the Sackler family, its owners, agreed to a multi-billion-dollar settlement while denying wrongdoing. But no executive went to prison, and much of the wealth amassed from decades of destruction remains intact. The opioid crisis is not just a case of regulatory failure or medical misjudgment. It is a story of systemic betrayal. A corporation knowingly marketed a highly addictive drug as safe, manipulated scientific discourse, exploited gaps in the healthcare system, and walked away with billions. It weaponized suffering for profit and left behind a trail of grief, death, and generational trauma. Even now, the ripple effects continue. Tens of thousands still die each year from opioid overdoses, and the crisis has morphed into a deadly fentanyl epidemic. Trust in the pharmaceutical industry, already strained, has been further eroded. The tragedy has exposed the fragility of public health safeguards when confronted by concentrated corporate power and a lack of accountability. The lie that opioids like OxyContin were non-addictive was not a misstatement. It was a calculated deception designed to sell more pills and expand market share. And it worked until the bodies piled too high to ignore. The opioid crisis will be remembered not just as a medical failure, but as a moral indictment of what happens when profit is allowed to silence truth.